Yeah.
So a lot of people clicked on the banner, because it was cheap,
Yeah.
video issues or something.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, and then we got like lots of responses.
That's really good. I like that idea. I think that would. But yeah, because people want to help you. Like they want to be helpful. They want to, participate and help make things better. So always play to that part of people's personality. Diaries or journals is another way that you can get people to give you some feedback while they're thinking about it all on their own time. So they don't have to have something that, like at 3 o'clock, you have to do this. It's something that they can do whenever they need to do it. And there's a bunch of different tools that you can do it with. There's a new one now I just downloaded this morning that you can do it on your phone even. You can have like multimedia type stuff. And it records them like longitudinally how they do stuff. I've surveyed or journaled ones that are shorter in duration. So like 1 week or 2 weeks, you tend to get better results than one that's like a 5-month long one. Because if you have really long studies, you're going to have to keep going to your customers over and over, like, hey, how you doing? I see that you haven't done anything yet, or you haven't checked in for a while. So you really kind of have to be on top of people to make sure that they're participating. And when they get onto the journal study, you have to be super clear about like what's expected of them, like how long are they supposed to, how long is a session, like what are they supposed to do, if you're giving them an incentive, what that incentive is, and just be as clear as you can, and then over communicate with them as well. You can also give them short activities. So, like once a day, give them like a little activity and have them give feedback on that. And then the next day, do another little activity. So you can get a lot of data from people by doing a lot of little things along the way. Has anybody done journal studies? Diary studies? Yeah. They're fun.
I'm interested in that tool that you said though about that you can download on your phone. Okay.
It's called like D something. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get it for you, but yeah. It looked really cool that you can get, cause it's the give multimedia type stuff as well, for user types, so you can see it aggregated and at the individual level. So it looks like a pretty
Did you
interesting.
do a whole study into that app, or is this for the participants? Are you studying into that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you talking about D-Scout?
that's the one. Have you used it?
Oh yeah, I always sign up to do like a guinea pig
Yeah.
study. Yeah, it's
What was
as like the person being studied. It's pretty cool because send you notifications and then whether or not you participate, and then as there's a lot of incentive to participate because they do offer financial. Yeah.
And so what kind of stuff did they ask you to do?
I did my most notable one was for NPR, and so they wanted examples of media that I was using throughout the day. And so if it wasn't necessary, if there's like TV media, then I would take a picture of the TV, and then they would ask like what I learned from that, why I chose that source, and what I took away from it, and like what the context I was in every time. And then they required so many touch points at different points throughout the day, and I think they would remind me to do it at a certain point of the day, and then if I fulfilled all those tasks, then I did it, and then they also followed up with a one-on-one phone interview with the live person.
Yeah, that's cool. Panels, so it's basically like a big group of people that you can go talk to. So you can keep track of your people either with like an Excel spreadsheet or through Outlook or Google Sheets or whatever. And it can be, you want to try to have your panels be as broad and as many people as you can, because you can recruit from these panels, you can send these folks surveys, and so if you have a lot of people, you can filter the kind of person that you're looking for. So if you have a product that has multiple facets of it, like, oh, I'm looking for someone who uses calendaring, and so you can kind of target those kinds of people within your panels. Some people use panels very selectively, so instead of just, this is a subset of my population, I'm looking for a small group of people to give me regular feedback for like a journal study. And so you can use it that way as well. A lot of times within panels, these are like your happy customers, your select customers. Even like if you have really angry customers, see if they participate, because they'll be very angry and be very verbal, and it's great to get that kind of feedback. I found you either get really happy or really angry people that want to participate in your panel. But the great thing about those is that these are some of the people that you want to communicate. They're your advocates, hopefully. And so if you're doing these kinds of studies, you can kind of share some of the behind-the-scenes information or data with these folks as well, because they want to get something out of it. Like they're spending their time with you, like giving you their thoughts and things like that. So it's helpful to give something back to them as well. And sometimes these people get special perks. So whether it's an incentive or a discount or access to something in beta testing something. So they get something out of it as well. Does anybody have UX or user panels as part of your work? You should all go get them. They're really important. They're super helpful. I mean, they just help like with recruiting and things like that. They make it so much easier. So I would definitely recommend trying to build those things out.
I'm trying to go in common.
It's like a set group of people that you just rely on to bounce off like other development that you're proposing and stuff like that.
Right, because it's like if you're designing something or whatever, I mean, you want to get feedback, and you can only go to your little circle of coworkers so much, because then they're going to be so knowledgeable about what you're doing. So you want to have people that you can go and tap on really quickly, and hey, do you have time in an hour? And have enough people there that someone will say yes, and so that you can get feedback from them really quickly.
Okay. We do that. I don't think we call it that, but
What do you call it?
well, we actually work on designs for our call center representatives in the services board. So we'll tap into, so it's E's or SMEs that
Yeah.
we can, and we'll get their feedback. But we mix it up. We don't always try to do it the same, but we do have a kind of a bank of SMEs that we're doing all.
Right, 'cause especially if they opt into it. I mean, that means like they've already said yes, I want you to contact me. So you don't have to feel guilty about spamming these people, because they want to hear from you. Yeah. We've done usability testing. Okay. Has anyone, the ones that you who haven't run one, have you guys watched a usability test before? No? Okay, so usability testing, this is a way that you can really quickly see like how your product is performing. You can do usability testing throughout the product development lifecycle. So you can do a usability test when you're in wireframes. So you can present something to customers, get feedback on wireframes before you do 1 ounce of code, and that'll save you a ton of money along the way, because then you can kind of pivot to match like those users' mental models of what they want this thing to do. So you can test during wireframes. Once you've gone into code, you can start testing then as well. So if you're doing like agile sprints, you can start testing after a sprint, and that'll help inform what the next sprint should be. So you can do a sprint, test, and then have those findings, get prioritized in the backlog for your next sprint, or a sprint maybe down the road. Sometimes people will do like 2 or 3 sprints and then do a test, and then a couple more sprints and then a test. So there's different ways that you can do it. You can also test, so that's like when you're in development, you can test it. And then once you're out live into the world, you can do benchmark testing to kind of see, okay, how are people doing things like then? And so you have the ability to do that. You can test pretty much anything, so it's not just like an iPhone or a computer or a website or a web app or a phone app that you can test. It's like, like this is something that's like a TV, like a smart TV. So you can have these facilities that'll set up the rooms for you to really mimic what it's like for them to be at home. These kinds of things are all moderated usability tests, so it's like you have a person who's sitting there watching you live do something. And the really great thing about that is that if you see them do something and they're confused or you have the ability to ask them a question. And you can have that back and forth. And if they go off on a tangent, let them go off on a tangent, but then you can always direct them back to like what you want them to do. So moderated usability tests are really great for that kind of stuff, that qualitative data. You can also, it's the other good benefit about it is that by having the usability moderator in the room watching stuff, you get really good data that way. That you'll get better than if you do a survey or if you do unmoderated testing or stuff like that. By having that person that you can interact with, it's super helpful. The bad thing about usability testing is that it takes a long time to set up sometimes, because you have to recruit someone, they have to come in or do something online, like over WebEx, but you have to have them at a specific time. So you can have a panel of 1,000 people and they're perfect participants, but they're not available at the one time that you need them to be at. So that can be really problematic with this live moderated usability testing. It's also a little expensive sometimes. So often in order to get that right person, like if you have like a thoracic surgeon, and that's the person that you need, you're gonna have to pay them a lot of money to come talk to you. So it can be pricey as well. So moderated usability testing. And then there's also unmoderated usability testing, so stuff like user testing or Group 11, user Zoom, and those are things where you can put up your product, whether it's wireframes or the app or a website, onto their site, and they'll go find people for you. They'll come back, they'll do a task with your site, and they'll give you feedback. It's super helpful for once you have a product that's a live app in the world to kind of do that beta, that dummy testing. Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing, and just kind of making sure that it's doing it right? It's not so good for that qualitative kind of feedback. So if they do a task and they go off on a tangent, you can't bring them back because they're doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning in their jammies, and you don't have that interaction. It's also helpful for if you don't have participants that you can go to. They have a panel of people that they can go find for you. Again, it can get pricey if you have someone really particular that you're trying to go after, but it's helpful if you have something that you can do as well. When you do these tasks, you have to be really specific because you want to try to be as specific as possible for that person who's reading it. They have no context about what it is they're about to do, so you have to be really detailed about what you want them to go do in this unmoderated test. But they're useful, so they're better at the end of the cycle than at the beginning of the cycle, but they're an important part of your toolbox as well. Has anyone run? Yeah?
I was just going to add on to that. If you can, try to put them into the context a little bit by maybe leading off with something like, imagine you're a person who's doing this, just to try to get them as close as you can to that real activity, and then be very specific about what you want them to do, because I think people go way off course.
And the other thing, like sometimes the people that give feedback on these, they're really savvy, and your users may not be as savvy. So it's another thing you kind of have to take it with a little grain of salt. Is that some of these folks, like they're like us, right? Like they want to participate and do tests and stuff like that. So they'll give you feedback. They can be very eloquent. Your normal users aren't eloquent, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But the other thing is for the moderated tests. I forgot to mention that, but for this one, you can either do it live in person, like you and I can sit down together and test something. You could do it remotely, so over like GoToMeeting or WebEx or Skype or Google Hangouts, you can facilitate these sessions as well. So just because someone isn't sitting next to you doesn't mean that you can't run a usability test. So it's like I can be here, you can be in Hawaii, and we can still talk. So those kinds of things are really helpful as well. So then, you've talked to people. Now you can do something, right? Like go do something with it. And I'm not saying go and do wireframes with it. There's other things that you can do as a researcher that'll help inform the design. So it's not just I do design and then I do my research and then you just start wireframing. There's other stuff that you can do before that. All right. So do you have surveys? Come on, family feud is funny. So one thing that you can do if you're already in development, and if you have access to like Trello or Jira or something like that, just write out some of your findings, add a ticket into the system. Because then like your product owner can start prioritizing that into the backlog for the next sprint. So that's one way to be like immediately actionable and useful and transparent within the product development lifecycle. And so this is one of the things that we try to do as much as possible, because I don't have to write a report. I don't have to go and take like a video clip and then show it to you and prove to you that I'm right. It's something that's transparent and easy. So if possible, just stick it into Jira. We love it. Yeah? So other things are things like user types and personas. Have you guys written these kinds of things before? Who has? User types, personas? All right. So for those of you that haven't, user types are a way to categorize the different types of users that you have for your product. So this is an example. If I have an app, like a kids app, the different user types I could have could be a student, a teacher, a parent, a principal. So they all have different interactions with the system. They could have different functionality that they use within the system. They could also even have different looks and feels. So like a kid may want to have a different visual display back to them than the principal would. And so basically what you do is just you write out what the different demographics are, what their different behaviors behavioral things are, what their pain points are, what kind of functionality do they want, what's the value proposition of your product for these folks. And you kind of spec out all the different things that you can think of for these different user types, and then you fill in the boxes. And so I usually just do this in Google Sheets or Excel, because I want to be able to see in a quick glance, who are all my different user types, how are they similar or different across these different pieces of data. Does anybody who does them have different things that you capture for your user types or personas?
So, we actually, like I said, we're working in like a call center environment, right? For service customers. And so we'll bring in, well, I guess it's a call, but we'll really bring in how they're measured and, how their performance is against those metrics. And we did that also within,
What's an example of a metric that you
their call handling time.
Okay,
For
got it.
their, stuff like that. So that we can, we kind of put that into the whole thing. And we actually did this last year when we were having an external company kind of give us some feedback on some design concepts that we had. And,
Yeah.
we gave them all this data, and it helped us too, because you can design the best thing in the world, and it's not fast, and it doesn't help them be efficient in their job, it's not going to.
Right, exactly. So if you have like that kind of like industry or product specific data that you need to capture, like one of these rows could be, like how long does it take to fix a customer problem? And you can have like the first one is a newbie, so a newbie it takes them 10 minutes to solve a problem versus an expert CSR is, more like the 2-minute mark. So you can use like industry specific or product specific data within your user stories and your user types and personas. And then one of the things that it's a living, breathing document, so as you're doing the research, you can be building out this document and filling in the blanks and stuff like that, because you'll discover that, there's additional user types, or actually these two user types are really the same person. So it's a living document that as you're doing the research, you're creating this document and it expands and collapses. And so exactly, so that's the number of user types can go across, and then different attributes. You can start adding these attributes, like as you discover these kinds of things, you can be like, actually that's really important, I want to stick that in there as a row. And so once you kind of have this spreadsheet of these different user types that you're doing your product for, then you can create personas for these. And these are basically, they're fictional characters that you create, and they represent those different user types. And you can use them just in conversation within your development team or your product team. Because you're like, Jane really needs to do such and such. And it just kind of puts like a personal face, a personal touch on your users. And it also sets context for why are you doing this to begin with. If it's Betty, the school teacher, you can picture poor Betty, the elementary school teacher, in this room with like a ton of kids and they're screaming and she doesn't have time to think about stuff. You can like really kind of see, like put her in context of it and think, well, what are those additional functionalities or features that would really help her? What doesn't make sense at all? So by having that kind of personal touch to it, it can really help your teams do stuff. And there's no set template for how to do a persona. Right? If you just do a Google search, like you'll see tons of different ways to do it, right? And some of them are really pretty, and some of them are really plain. But basically, the thing that you want to try to keep is like the persona name. So who is it? A lot of times you kind of want to use alliteration to begin with. So if you have a student, it's Sally the student. The principal is Patty the principal. So it's an easy way to kind of remember that kind of stuff without mnemonics. So you have like their persona name, what user type they are. Often you have a picture of a typical person of what this could look like. A typical quote of what this person would say. So like who is this person? Like what's like this person can be like, I hate pop-ups, or whatever it is. You want to have a typical quote that they would say. And then different kinds of features that you can have, like what's their demographic information. If that's important for your product, make sure that you have that in there. And it could be things like, I don't know if you can read this. But it's things like age, education, marital status, location, job, hobbies, and what's that kind of, who are these people in that bucket? And then things like what are their goals, what are their pain points, any domain-specific information, so that would be for your CSRs, that kind of stuff, or if you're doing something with scientists, what kind of doctoral degree did they get? So you can have that kind of information in there. And then I like to have features and functionality, so what are they going to be using within my product tool set? So I can have a quick glimpse about, oh yeah, these are the things I need to think about. And then I also like to have like a little graph of their behavior. So if you're doing surveys or you're getting that kind of quantifiable data, this is where you put it. So you can see what their behaviors are in a really quick glimpse. So if you're looking at 5 different personas, you can see this change depending on your persona that you're looking at. So it's another way to bring that data from research into something that you can actually use in your day-to-day stance. So that's another great place to put stuff. For those of you that have done personas, do you stick anything else in there?
Aspirations, I guess aspirations
Yeah.
could be similar to goals,
Right.
like to write a best-selling book or something like that.
Right.
Well, what we did, I guess it's, I know you're saying a quote, but what we did is we put kind of a story
Yeah.
of kind of typical different scenarios that they had to face and how they dealt with them.
That'd be interesting.
And that's what we did because really kind of helps, it really helps everyone
Mhm.
to kind of understand, especially people who don't know what they do, right?
Right.
The kind of interactions that they have and, how they work with the system and what they have to do to service customers.
Yeah, like storytelling is so huge as part of like what we do as researchers, right? It's not like we have to go do this stuff, but then we have to tell other people about it. And like through a quick little story, it'd be really impactful. What were you gonna say?
Where would like responsibilities fall into the persona? You know, like, okay, I'm a system administrator and these are the types of things that I'm responsible for. Sort of like, and how does this relate to said product solution, campaign, etc.?
Yeah, I would stick that kind of that domain information or like the product specific
Okay.
category.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean that's absolutely the kind of stuff that you want to make sure that you capture is that kind of stuff for a certain product is really important.
So I would say experience level,
Experience level.
such as like working within our business. You have people who have been using this product for a really long time,
Yeah.
versus novices.
Yeah.
So that could be helpful. I don't know.
Mhm.
You can fit in some of these other areas.
Yeah.
but-
No, absolutely. Like that could be demographic, that could be within that domain specific information, or that could be like your persona type is like the experience level. So yeah, there's no like absolute one way that you can do it. You definitely have to look at your own product and the project that you're on and kind of tweak it and what makes most sense for you. Because a lot of times like I'll get like hobbies. A lot of times I don't care what your hobby is, but for some projects it's really important. So you really have to be mindful of like use it as a guide, but then customize it, add stuff to it, take stuff away, use whatever you need. Some of the ones like they're just really beautiful, like what they do. Like some of them are like really like artistic. And the other thing that sometimes people do is they take those user type, that spreadsheet, and they turn it into like a little visual design as well. So you can have like on a quick glimpse, like what is it? Who are these people that you're dealing with? And so there's some nice ways that you can do a quick little visual snapshot as well.
Another thing about that is make sure that you put these up in a way that the rest of your team will actually give a crap about.
What do you mean?
Sometimes if you put too much information in these, and you want to share these with the rest of your team, that's got to follow along because they need to understand who you're building your experience for. It's not just for the UX designer, sometimes it's for your extended team. Make sure not to put, like what you're saying is like, you might not need to know about hobbies. Well, also, you might want to think about tailoring this to the extended audience that you present.
Really good point.
And another alternative to personas that I've seen used, I haven't had a chance to do it myself, but I thought it was a pretty cool way, was to go with cartoons. Bonnie Colville-Hyde did a great presentation at UX+DEV a couple of years ago on using cartoons to communicate UX. And basically, talk about storytelling, take those characters. Here's my IT guy, and he's trying to solve this problem, and you just walk him through it. You put it into a comic form, and people just read through it. It's usually kept very simple, and you get that feeling. And I thought they were a nice alternative to personas.
Yeah.
Got somebody who can. There's even a comic like app out there for Mac. It's like $20 or $40 or something like that. You can sub together comics easy.
Another way I've seen those used too is if when people just trying to get money for something and they just have this graphical representation of their life. This is what I'm happening in my life every day, that they can take it forward to the decision makers and just instead makes it much more neutral, that they can actually just look at this sketch. And that sometimes can help them get what they need.
And you kind of like give me another idea here. So often you can also, there's also, besides like storyboard that and things like that, there's also ways you can create videos as well based on your comics.
That's exactly
So that
what
could be
I was
another really great way, like using like raw shorts or any of those Actionable or any of those other ones to create these little videos that represent like what you're seeing in the field. That's another really great way of doing it. Speaking of which. So customer journey maps. So you've gone and you've talked to people. Who's done a customer journey map? Awesome. So basically what a customer journey map is a quick visual display of how your customer interacts with your product from beginning to end. I have no idea, I've never heard of your company, to discovery, to I've signed up and I'm using it, I'm an active user, these are all my pain points, I stopped using your product and I'm going away. So this is like the entire customer journey of how they're using your product. And so it's really similar to how you set up that user types thing, where you discover like what are the different phases along the way. So every company will have something slightly different. And then all the different information that you have in there, it's like what are their pain points, what's really important, if there's any small little workflows that they have to do for that particular area. What's the most important thing for this phase, for this customer, for how they go through it. And you can do the visual display again a ton of different ways. If you do like a little Google search, this is what you'll see. And so the common thing is that you'll see like there's different phases, that happen along the way. Oftentimes there's some type of data chart that either they're really engaged and then they drop engagement or something like that. Sometimes they have little workflows within them as well. So you can't really see, but this user has to do this little workflow, so you'll stick that in there. Behavioral type information is go in there as well. But some people do kind of circles and like that way. Some people do swim lanes. So there really isn't a template that you can use for it. But the goal is that you really are trying to like communicate what's their story, right? It's a storytelling tool. It's a way to visually do that storytelling for someone to see how they go through the process from beginning to end. For those folks, like, how did you guys do your story maps?
Similar to that, so you're representing what you're doing at every step of the way. It's very helpful when you're working with the rest of the team to visualize where content is going to be plugged in along the way. User cases, videos, or forms.
Yeah. And yeah.
We put together customer journey using subway map. So we have all the different, subway paths and all depending on who the user were. The ICAD, the end user, the hands-on technical guy. So we had at each point of the journey the moments of truth where pain point or something good or something bad. So we represented everything. We worked with an illustrator, so she created like specific drawings for every point of the journey. It was really cool. And then we turned this into our website using Asher. So it was good. You could just mouse over one subway, right one color, and it would take you to the journey of a specific person. So it just used like fade outs, fade in. Stuff.
Oh, very cool.
So it was easier to share with everyone. And having specific paths that you wanted to see.
The thing that's really cool about it is it's interactive, right? It's not just like a flat thing, but you can like interact with it and explore and stuff. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and the only other thing I wanted to add is like what's the critical moment within a path or within that phase is like making sure that you convey what's that critical moment. So if it's someone who's trying to decide, am I going to spend money, am I going to flood a credit card or not, like that could be like the critical moment for that phase so that when you're actually doing your designs or you're trying to prioritize what you need to work on next, that you look at those critical moments within this customer journey map, so that'll help inform the business decisions for the product as well. But yeah, so these guys already said everything. So basically what they said. But yeah, so comments are another great way to communicate visually what's going on for a user across the customer journey map or a user story. But they're another really great way to do it. And you don't have to be an artist. You can kind of like sketch your way through it as well. But that's another good way to do it. And it's kind of body storming is another way that kind of puts you into the shoes of your user, sometimes quite literally. So if you're working with someone who has limited mobility, like what is it like so that you can't like bend your fingers or move your legs? And so you basically like put yourself physically into wherever your user is, and you try to mimic like what they're doing and what their experience is like. So if you're trying to come up with something, like they're gonna have on their arm, or it's sometimes like a portal that you're trying to like interact with people, or you're just trying to use like a microwave oven or whatever it is. It's another way for you to take the research that you already have, use it in a way that you can create empathy for your users, and then create a product that has functional requirements out of that. So it's that transition piece that can help you take that research into a functional requirement. And so doing this kind of stuff is sometimes helpful. Has anyone ever done this? Yeah? What was it like?
It was actually my undergraduate. I did architecture, so a group of us went out and we had people who were blind, so they had their eyes covered. We had people who had to be in wheelchairs, even if they could walk, just for the experience. And then it was a majority of men, so we had them wear backpacks on the front to simulate pregnancy. And we had to walk around campus for like an hour trying to see what it was like to having the university having these, kind of limitations that we never would have thought about. And it's interesting. It's a nice way to get like different perspectives on, especially like designing an environment. It's like things you would never think about because you can do it.
Right.
So it was really, it was awesome. It was fantastic. It was really fun too. We had the blind leading the lane, leading the pregnant. So it was a mess, but a lot of fun.
That's very cool. That's awesome. So you've done all this kind of stuff, right? Then you come back and you write out your user story. So who's written a user story or worked with user stories? Yay! All right. So as you know, it's something like put in your user type. I want to. What's the task or the functionality or the feature, so that I can. What's the benefit? What's that value proposition for me? And then the user acceptance criteria. So if it's something like I have one on top of my head. As a mom, I want to use an app that shows what size my kid's foot is really quickly, so that I can buy shoes for my kid before he starts screaming at me. And then the user acceptance criteria that I want to do this in less than a minute. So it's a way to build out your QA tests as well as you're writing your user stories to make sure that you have something measurable and some kind of metric that you can tell your user stories to. And the other thing about having a value proposition in there is that that's what your business people are talking about. Your business and marketing folks are all about value propositions and the benefit metric matrices and stuff like that. So this is a way to bring in another department into how you're creating products as well. So that's how we do it. Does anybody do anything different for user stories?
We also write requirements in. So
Yeah.
like we'll write the story, like you suggested with it's kind of like our primary description. Then we'll do requirements that are very specific line items of everything that we are requiring developers to do. And then the acceptance criteria is like an iteration of the requirement. It's basically like a restatement of the requirement, but the way that I would accept it if I were testing.
Okay. So is there like another column in there for the requirements?
Yeah.
And do you do it like ability to blah, 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 or do you have like a specific format to do your requirements?
No, not really. It's very like fact-based and
Yeah.
action-based. So
Like if you were writing a spec kind of a thing?
it would be something like, a bullet in my requirement would be like, user must be able to filter by all statuses, closed, open, whatever.
Yeah. That's super helpful for developers and for QA because you're like really clear and specific and not going to the level of writing a whole crazy spec, but it's still getting down to that detailed level of like what goes into a pull down or whatever it is. Yeah. So that's another really great idea to do it. Then creating workflows. So this was a brainstorming. So we came up with an idea of the one I just said of I want to measure my kid's foot because he refuses to let me stick his foot in one of those little things. So I need another solution. So this is what we did kind of brainstorming for how do I do something like that, right? And so just coming up with what the idea for the product is, like brainstorming. We did some sketches on the whiteboard, and we kind of drew like arrows for what goes where. And then from there, we kind of transitioned it over into the workflow. So this is a mobile app. So is it an existing user? Yes or no? No, it's not an existing user, so he goes to sign up. We have a ruler functionality where we figure out the size of the foot. And we go into the filter, so is it a boy, is it a girl? What colors do you like? What other kind of features do you want? Go to a product list view that has multiple views. So you have a map view, and a list view, and a photo view. And then drilling down to the photo detail that shows you what it is and what store it's at near you. It's at Payless, that's 2 miles away. So that would be a new user flow. Versus I'm an existing user, I go to home, I pick profiles, and from pick profiles I can go look at product views. So just creating these kind of like quick sketches is another way that you can take your research, have that kind of functional requirements or that concept that's still really fuzzy, and stick some process into it so that you can communicate that to a designer or to a developer, whoever that you're working with. So it's another way to take kind of like that research where you're brainstorming or you're doing a focus group or whatever, but then you can pull something out of it that's actionable that you can start working with. So even though if you're not doing the actual final design, you can still do workflows and hand those off as well. Does anybody do that kind of stuff? Yeah? What's your experience like? Yeah?
Just ask, is this considered like a tree jack? Is this the same thing as a tree jack? No? Okay. I need to understand what a tree jack is a little better.
Like the optimal workshop stuff?
Yeah, I
Or-
think that's what he's talking about using. One of my designer guys talking about using that.
So Optimal Workshop does more. So the tree jack one with an Optimal Workshop is it studies information architecture of something. So you can say like this is the structure for say an internal portal for a company. And so you have HR, you have legal, you have whoever it is, and then you give them tasks to like find this kind of data, and it shows how they go through this tree structure to find that data. And so what it is, the data visualization that you get back is super cool. It's like a dot, and you can see like a spider web, like where they go off, and like what are success paths and fail paths and things like that. So that's a tree jack. So
So it's a little different than like just a workflow.
yeah. But those are really helpful. I love doing them. So then, low fidelity wireframes. This one's an Actionable, but there's a ton of different ones that are out there that you can use. You can even just like sketch on a whiteboard, take a picture of it. I mean, low fidelity frames are super easy to do. But this is something that's, again, like as the researcher, or you're doing research, you're going and you talk to people, how do you translate that data that you get into something you can communicate? And it's really simple to do that through wireframes. So one of the things, I would say, like these are my rules. It's like you never know what you want until you see what you don't want. It's super easy to describe something, but then as soon as you show me what your interpretation of it, I'm like, no, that's not what it is, right? So it's always better to get that kind of stuff out. Your first, second, fifth, 10th, 20th versions of it is gonna be wrong. Just accept it, embrace it. You're gonna fail, and you're gonna iterate on it, right? So the faster that you start conceptualizing some of the stuff that you're pulling out of research, the faster you'll get to where you need to be at the end. And then, just that iterate phase, right? So like iterate, and then iterate some more. The faster that you start wireframing and getting stuff out and getting that feedback, the faster that you're gonna get to where you need to be at the end. So even if you're still, doing the research, you can still kind of create something actionable and useful for people to start using and getting that feedback back. Right? Because if I create something, if we draw something, you and I are doing a session together, and we sketch something really quickly in a session, you'd be like, no, change that. We've just, saved months of time because we were able to sketch something in a session together right away. So you can do low fidelity wireframes during a usability test or an interview or whatever it is, because you'll get a lot better data that way. So then, you've done all your stuff, right? So maybe you have that wireframe. So it's time to put on like your rhino skin, your thick skin, and then you go back out and you talk to people with all this stuff that you just did, right? So you have your customer journey map, you have your persona, your user types or whatever. Go and test that, see if that's right. It's important to continue to get that feedback. Even though now you're a designer, you produce something that now you're attached to, you're emotionally attached. You just gotta go take your lumps and go talk to people about it, because you're just going to iterate on it, and it's going to get better and better and better from there. But that's it. Are there any other things that, yeah?
On average, how long does the process from beginning to, just on average from?
It takes as long as you give it. Yeah.
The reason I ask is a lot of our clients are early stage startups that are wanting to move 400 miles an hour. We don't really have the luxury most of the time to take 5 or 6 months to do, but we know analytics are important.
Yeah. So can you give me, because I work at a lot of startups too, so like, what are they trying to do? Do they already have like an idea of something, or do they have like an MVP already, or?
No, I mean, it's all over the place.
Okay.
Like I said, we've worked with an idea all the way up to, as we said, series A or around it. So typically, it's a startup that's still analytics they know are important, but it's expensive as well to hire a company to do that as well. So we're trying to gauge how deep to go into analytics before it doesn't make sense for them to.
When you say analytics, how are you defining analytics?
I guess maybe better put so. That's a good question. Yeah. Probably more on the usability side.
So it's like what we do a lot is that we'll test wireframes, right? Because that's you can do like a wireframe flow in a day. So and then depending on who you're testing with, I mean, hopefully you'll have something you can do those kind of tests with. But I mean, we kind of skip a lot to the wireframes because then you get that kind of feedback right away. And then you can that'll inform sometimes your user types and personas and that kind of stuff later on.
It probably also is up to the entrepreneur as well to determine what level of, okay, this will accept it, or what percentage of, or what's the metric that we will say, yes, this is acceptable. Move on, because that can be all over.
Right. You mean for like satisfaction
Yeah.
or like engagement, that kind of stuff? Like what's like how much growth are they having within? Because they have to have that traction in order to get it. Oh yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. So yeah, we tend to test wires, and that's where we spend a lot of time. Anyone else? All right, awesome. That's it. That's all I got.